Yeah. Yeah, we could. I guess
Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Business Barbershop Podcast. I am Chris.
I'm Keen.
And we don't really actually have anything specific we want to talk about. I have an idea for something that will probably lead us down many different pathways. But we are here. It is December 17th, 2024. You have 7 shopping days left. If you have not bought anything yet, we were just both mentioning that we still had some shopping left to do, and or probably just haven't started yet. That's like more along the lines of a description for me. I kind of know what I want, but want to get, but I haven't gotten it yet. So
yeah.
Anywho, I digress.
That's the first warning is if you're good at delegating your staff to help do a bunch of stuff, there might be still stuff on your plate that you forgot to do. I am in that same boat. I've made it my life where I didn't have to worry about setting up Christmas stuff. I just kind of show up and do whatever. And then there's this aha moment of like between my wife and people who work for me, everything was taken care of except for the gift for my wife. So I need to get on that.
Yeah. I feel like it's also kind of hard sometimes to buy things for people. Like we mostly just get stuff. If you want it, we just get it. You know, like I don't know. And I don't. Is Diane a big gift person? She seems like she might be like a gift as a love language.
No.
Not
What's
so much.
funny is that people might think that because she has very specific things that she likes, and she does like buying nice things for herself.
Yeah.
But it does not do very much for her at all.
Yeah.
Buying her gifts.
Well, growing up, I think it's kind of how you grow up, you know, what you received as love language. And, you know, if you didn't, like, I didn't get, like, gifts were never like a really big, huge part of my life as a kid. Like we had Christmas and we did gifts and stuff. And as a kid, I was always like, you had a big, long list, but it wasn't like, that wasn't the way that we showed love to each other. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So I got to get something too. Should be fun.
Yeah. I do have a handful of topics that we could dive into. If you want to get started.
Here's one of the other things I want to talk about too, by the way. I'll let you go, but I want to plant this in your brain. In case we run out of things to talk about, or if we just want to go there at the end.
Okay.
This is like an end of the year thing that a lot of people do, which is like your favorite things, you know? So just like maybe like one or two things that you really you know, love, or maybe are just interested in, or learning more about, or you know, are just sort of like fascinated by. I thought that'd be fun too. So, all right, what do you got? What do you got for us?
I was clipping through some headlines, and you know, it's not that often that political or foreign affairs shows up on like business blogs or papers or whatever you want to call it, publications.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure this is probably all over the AP too, but I just read this thing saying that the country of Ukraine said that they assassinated Russia's head of nuclear and chemical weapons with a basically like almost like a car bomb. It was a bomb inside of a scooter. Did you hear that?
No, but I'm not. No, I have not heard it. I don't. No, I have not. That's interesting though.
I don't tend to pay that much attention. I hear this foreign news stuff get thrown around, including on like Wall Street Journal once in a while. But the head of Russia's chemical weapons and nuclear program is not a small person to like get assassinated. You know,
yeah, that's a big deal.
And especially ahead of Trump probably planning to mediate some kind of deal between them, because he's always said that he was planning on trying to do that, you know. So
100%.
The only reason why that stuff takes an interest to me, because again, I'm not trying to say we only care, but this is a business podcast, but it's also it takes the most interest. I only like to try to worry about things that have an impact to me and or also will change how I decide on certain things. So I do try to pay attention to how foreign affairs could be impactful in terms of like a potential black swan event or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they have, you know, one of the things that I don't know where I was hearing about this as it relates to like war now, like things have kind of shifted a little bit and become really sort of like more dangerous for everyone because I believe they have like these supersonic missiles now. Like Russia has them. I'm sure we have them, but they're so fast that um you can't like shoot them down. They're too fast. You basically, if you hear it, you're dead. Like that's how fast it's coming in.
How far do they
Um,
travel?
I think they travel pretty far. Again, I don't. I just like listen. I heard this on the periphery, and I was like, "Wow, that's pretty interesting stuff." Because, um, you know, Ukraine has been sending missiles into Russia, like deeper into Russia, which supposedly we have kind of approved, which is interesting for an outgoing president to be doing that kind of stuff. But
Hmm.
yeah, those foreign affairs things are crazy. You just wonder like, does the head of the agency, do they actually know what they're doing? You know, or are they more like a bureaucrat just running the program? That'd be interesting to know.
Yeah, that I don't know. That I don't know.
Because like
Um,
you could have like, you know, Elon Musk, if somebody blew him up, that would be a big loss because he brings like a lot to the table more than just like being a organizer, you know. Be like Tim
well,
Cook. It'd be like Tim Cook versus Steve Jobs in a way.
yeah, and well, I'd also share that. Let's just talk about like some events that specifically are very market related and business related. The argument about like energy independence and the rise of inflation in the last 4 years was very, very heavily related to the war with Ukraine and the EU cutting off purchasing oil from Russia, and the fact that here we are trying to get into this energy independence, but we also want to be green. And because that's where the big argument comes from, like, I'm in the world of like energy, this takes a big personal interest of mine because, for most people, they know I pay attention to environmental and stuff. I know some people don't believe in it. You know, what I saw, I believe it. And, and so I'm still a believer, but
Yeah.
but the, but the discussion of moving to more renewables is good, but also we're not in a place to focus on it as much as long as while we transition away from it, we're still depending on other countries to provide the energy that we are trying to transition away from, right? And so, which is what drove up inflation, and now it's impacted the market. And like all things, it's not a luxury to say we want to save for our future, but it is a luxury if we're planning. Um, and sorry about that. But right, people right now are feeling the pinch today because we don't have energy independence. And so,
Well, I don't know. I don't know if I would say energy independence and inflation are directly tied together in
oh
this
no, it's
circumstance,
100%
but
tied into it. I'm literally, because you have to understand, inflation is my world. Inflation
I
drives
understand.
long-term yields on bonds,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah,
when inflation goes up and affects long-term yields on bonds, then rates go up. So I'm
I
watching
understand.
the factor that factor, and it was a
Yeah, but
very
they're not.
direct connection
You're
to
saying
the
there's a
price of
direct
oil.
causation between one and the other, not a
Yeah,
correlation.
yeah,
How do you?
because energy is used because the cost of us filling our cars with gas and the cost of us heating our houses is not big enough to really drive up inflation on a big level. So there's a thing called the CPI and PPI reports. These are like your inflation reports,
Mhm.
right? Um, there's a core price producer index and then the producer price index. The reason why they're different is because one is basically the true cost of producing the goods. The other one is like the total cost of goods, including delivery of the goods. And that's why energy is such a big driver in terms of inflation. Is it's not just what we spend to power our house, power our cars. It's the price of delivering goods and manufacturing them that drives up and makes the actual cost of the goods on the retail price drive up, which makes all grocery prices go up, which makes all clothing costs go up, which means all building costs go up, right? So that's why energy has such a big impact in terms of how it relates to inflation. And so it definitely was a big part of inflation moving up the last couple of years because then it's,
Hmm.
what do we spend to produce these goods? What are we spending to deliver the goods, right?
What
And
about
when
the
that drives
$2
up,
trillion that got dumped into the even the U.S. economy from COVID?
Yeah, that I mean, that's for
That's what I'm
sure.
saying. It's hard to say something is
It's not
caused by
it's
something.
not the most important factor, but it's always been that is a that's an example of a black swan event. When I'm talking about how energy impacts inflation, this is something that was taught to me in mortgage banking well over a decade ago, almost 2 decades ago, right? Like within the first 3 years I was in the business. Pay attention to inflation reports because they affect bond yields and the value of bonds, and value of bonds change mortgage rates. And the reason why energy is such a big part of inflation is because it's not just what we spend for our gas and powering our houses, it's the cost of producing the goods and delivering the goods. And when I heard that, I'm like, oh, that actually makes perfect sense. And so the best way to put it is this: the way I saw the war with Ukraine and Russia and how that impacted inflation was this: we caused a huge major inflationary thing by doing all that quantitative easing and putting money into the system. That was driving up inflation. And right when we took the decision of like, hey guys, we need to start fixing this, I don't think it's an accident that Russia said this is a good time for us to try to do this, because it really puts a pinch on them, because they're already going to be dealing with this inflation problem. It's only going to make it that much worse. They can see how dependent they are, on their energy, and how the goods that we buy from other countries are dependent on their energy. And so well, everyone's dealing with it, because everyone, including the EU, they had their own versions of dealing with COVID, right?
Yeah.
And so right when everyone's like, we need to deal with this inflation thing, not just the US, and all these other countries so heavily dependent on their energy, they basically said, we have leverage to tell people to stay out of our space because they're so dependent on us. And while they're, and it's not like a sole reason to do it, but it's an extra reason to do it right then. And the minute they did it, I thought, yeah, I could see what you guys are doing.
Russia though didn't decide to stop selling energy.
No, it was the places that it's us telling other countries that we support, we won't buy things from them if they keep buying oil from them.
Right.
And it puts them on a pinch, right? And so this constant thing, we're like, well, we need the energy. I'm like, I know, but we don't want them to be in the war. And then it's like, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what a bloody mess. But it's a mess that they're happy to create because they know that people are dependent on them on stuff, right? It's that leverage that you're using against your people, your opposition, when they're dependent on you. And it's very much like the discussion that we're having about tariffs with China, right? Like who needs more? Who needs who more, right? And I think that one of the things our soon to be new administration that was our former administration, a Trump administration. That's one of the things that I think Trump, in terms of as a business person, has always understood that we are very dependent on China, but make no mistake, we made China, right? We are the buyer of their goods, right? And our capitalistic method of let's find the cheapest, most efficient way to get manufactured goods at affordable cost has drove us to being dependent on China. But we created the monster that we're competing against, which means that even though it would be very painful to charge these high tariffs, it would be like breaking my arm to kill a bear, right? Like you eat my arm while I pull out my gun and shoot you in the head, and I'm going to walk away missing my arm, and you're going to be dead. Is kind of the way his approach is, the way he looks at it. Which I'm not saying it's not going to be painful to go through that process, but I understand where he's coming from. The result of all of that stuff, it's to be known to me. I don't know how it's going to all play out, but I do believe that if it became a hard stance where we don't buy anything from China ever again, then I think that would actually probably cause a war of some type. It would probably get really, really ugly because it would make them get really, really poor. And when people get really poor, they get desperate.
Well, they would have to. I doubt it. I don't know if it would lead to war.
No, I'm just talking like some kind. If you always have to look at like here's where we likely land. But this I have learned, by the way, and I've learned a lot of this in the process of like the risk of legal litigation and then negotiation, preceding a potential litigation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even though you don't want to go to the nastiest place, you have to show that you're willing to, right?
Yeah.
And so it kind of, in the negotiation, it's like, let's hope it doesn't go to this, but let's just discuss where we really stand. And if it got really, really nasty, this is what it would look like. And the really nasty version of us coming off of China is massive inflation, increased cost of goods, recession for us, people getting pissed, right? And we would literally demolish their GDP, right?
Correct. I
And it
mean, they
would be
would. The
ugly
thing
for
is,
both
they would.
sides.
Yeah, they would feel that pretty quickly, though. You know, that's
they
the.
feel yes, because at the end of the day, what happens is our cost of goods go up. We have to pay more for our cost of goods from others' resources, and then but it also would create an immense amount of opportunity for other countries that missed a chance to be what China was for us.
Yeah.
I've always wondered why a lot of Central and South America do want to participate in that space. I mean, maybe the cost of producing natural resources and labor is still way cheaper in Asia than it is in Central and South America, but there's so many poor people in Central South America. You would think that, and the cost of delivering the goods would be a little bit cheaper, I think, logistically. But
I would say this is just a guess. I just think that uh like the organization and the culture is a little bit different in both places. Like, China's been communist for so long. They basically tell you what to do.
right, it's funny that they're communists playing in a capitalistic world.
Yeah. Yeah. But they have it's a lot more easier for them to just say, like, this is what's happening, and it happens. Versus some of these other in Central America and in those type of places that they're just like, I think there's more diversity of political influence in leadership where you haven't been locked into that for like basically decades,
Well, there are examples. I mean, I don't know what the political climate looks like, but isn't Venezuela communist? Am I wrong?
Yeah, it is. But the thing is, it is right now, but it hasn't been for 100
and
years.
They could try to produce like China does, but they definitely could be a resource for energy. They have a lot of oil there. If I remember right.
Yes, they do. But you're right. They do. But the money gets funneled most of the time to individuals as opposed to, into, I guess, maybe infrastructure or, into some of the things. Because, China, for what it's worth, they have huge factories. They have, like they are organized in a way to create these goods and do these things. They still get to skim off the top, I think, probably a little bit, but that's how it goes.
Yeah.
So yeah, all these things are going to be interesting. I think we talked about this the last time, but a lot of this is you got to just wait and see what happens a little bit.
Yeah. But when I bring up the news that I'm reading, it's to me, it's is this going to start a domino effect? Because it was we are in this window of time where Trump has told everyone that he was going to try to end that war pretty quick.
Right.
And
well, it's really hard now. I think it's really hard for that domino effect to happen because we're like 3 weeks away from changing leadership. And
exactly. And it would take it would take something pretty drastic to make it, to kind of disrupt that a little bit more, right? And what I'm referencing is like that. I could be wrong. I just felt like that was like oh gosh, I wish there was an expert I knew of that I could talk to say like how big of a deal was this, because it feels like it might be.
Yeah, but like what, big enough to throw? Like they're already at war, so they're going to be like at like extra special war. I think at the end of the day, Putin wants to get out of this war. He wants to stop it and just get what he, because I think he's probably going to get what he wants because it's whatever, relatively reasonable request.
Right.
Hey, I don't want the country that shares a significant border with me to be a part of the United Nations or whatever. Or no, what is it? It's not United Nations. It's
the EU.
No, it's the
NATO.
NATO.
Mm-hmm.
Which I get it. I get where he's coming from. Here's and this is a perfect example is that who we don't want Russia and Cuba collaborating together right next to us.
Yeah.
It's easy for us to talk about it because we are pretty much protected on all sides.
Yeah,
we have like the nicest neighbors in the world, Canada and Mexico, and then the ocean. So we're pretty good,
Yep. All right. Enough about foreign affairs. Probably get into some stuff that we actually probably are experts in. I had heard this is very specific real estate related. I thought it was probably worth sharing. Something that I finally dove into on a much deeper basis. I've been ever since we had our series that we talked about the multifamily density and ADU code being updated across the state, I've put more emphasis of what areas will actually have the landscape where they have the value and their neighborhoods look like something that you can work with, right? Because when, let me take a step back and actually make a statement that I think that everyone should hear if they're going to be in the world of being a property developer, which is a big part of investing in Washington State real estate moving forward. As exciting as it sounds like to invest in all these new areas, a lot of people will over-evaluate how much their properties are worth because, I have a property that you can develop now, right? I have land I can build. I could build something around what I have. So the first thing I want to say is this. That's the whole state now. So I know that there's a window of time where if you had like a subdividable property, and look, if you have a property subdividable and you can squeeze multiple units per parcel now, then obviously a true subdividable property, where you can add more to one parcel and then cut it into another parcel and then add even more, will still then technically have more value than the other house. You can just add a few. But when you think, I can add a few more to my house, it's worth a lot more. You cannot try to charge the developer a huge premium. I know that sounds like me being biased, but it's not. It's really just talking about getting rid of wasted negotiations. When I have sellers who are like, you can add all these units, my property's worth a lot more. Like, if you want me to download the size of the property list that has the exact same or better development value than yours, it's thousands of properties now because it's a statewide change. So the ones that will have way more upside to them are the ones that have very, very specific cities where the cities also have lots and lots of value, and the way that they were developed before has lots and lots of room. And to summarize it, Seattle will always be the Mecca. It's not that there's more value in other places. We know there's more value in the east side. We know that we can get similar, if not higher values of the North Seattle in certain areas of North Seattle, such as Edmonds. But the reason why Seattle will always be, but even though Seattle is the Mecca, doesn't mean you can get a huge premium either, unless you have a really, really unique property. And the reason why Seattle is the Mecca is because to do infill developments like what's happening in our state, you need to have a property where when you build extra units on it, they have some kind of natural markable access. You live in Kirkland. I have properties in Kirkland. You know what most of Kirkland looks like. Most of Kirkland looks like Rose Hill, Finn Hill, Bridle Trails, right? Highlands, Moss Bay. Maybe not as much Moss Bay, that's a little closer downtown, but it's only really right in east of Market, west of Market, Houghton, and Moss Bay. And that sounds like a lot because it's 4 neighborhoods, but as you know, these are small. These are some of this. Houghton's a bigger neighborhood, but it's still not that big. But the other 3 I just mentioned are very, very small neighborhoods, right?
Yeah.
North and South Rose Hill.
Tiny.
Yeah. North Rose Hill, just saying North Rose Hill, South Rose Hill, Bridles Trail, right? Those 3 neighborhoods are bigger than all the other ones combined times like 5.
Yeah.
Right. And those neighborhoods were developed with dead-end streets, cul-de-sacs, larger size homes, and no one wants to walk through someone's side gate to get to a backyard cottage and own a unit like that in Kirkland. Right. The only people who want to live in that unit is a true second generation. Grandma's living in a granny flat in the backyard. That's not. It's not that it's not marketable, but it's not marketable to develop that. And so Seattle will always be the Mecca because it represents our highest populous city. It represents in terms of most valuable places in Western Washington. If you take the most expensive neighborhoods, like Seattle may not have as much value as like the east side, but Laurelhurst gets pretty close to Medina, on that waterfront, right?
Yeah.
It scratches close
on the waterfront for sure.
Yep, and the city is flooded with these tiny little old houses on alley lots that have double ingress, long, skinny, and the houses aren't long and skinny. And so you can look on any city block that has an alley, which is literally more than 50% of the whole Seattle, and those properties all have some upside to it. So the short version of it is this: if you have a corner lot in Renton that you can finally build ADUs on, right? But your average price point is still lower than Seattle, your property's not worth a ton more, because to a developer, they could do the same shit in Seattle and it's already been proven and the model's already been proven. So why would your property in Renton, when no one's done it yet, and the market is you can kind of project it, but it's not totally well known, right? It's for sure worth a bunch more on your corner lot when the cost per square foot is the same as Seattle, and there's examples of that product all over the place, and there's examples of lots to buy all over the place. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
So
Well, and yeah, I think it also just goes back to like the math got a math, you know? I mean, and this sort of like circles back a little bit to what we were talking about with this dump of all this money in a few years ago. That money is gone. It doesn't mean real estate isn't appreciating, because I think it is still growing, but it's at a much, much lower rate, you know, where you can't just expect to come in with something.
I expect our appreciation in the next 3 to 5 years to be pretty slow, and it's for two reasons. One won't go away for a while, which is there's two ways to control, like the interest. This is products that are purchased with financing. So as
Yep.
long as financing is more expensive, then the cost is more expensive. That will slow appreciation. That's exactly what higher rates does, which is what they want, right? But I will say that real estate got deflated way faster than most other markets did in terms of resale costs, right? But that caused inflation in rent because jobs were still there, right? But for Washington specifically, the other thing is the basic, consumer price model of supply and demand. If you do give people the ability to develop real estate and make backyard cottages, and housing does increase, that does give you a chance to. Now, I've seen lots of real estate reports of how many housing units are actually going to be created based off of our inventory and our jobs, and we still have a shortage. But it doesn't just change the fact that as long as there's still some implementation of some extra inventory, it will. I don't think it's going to depreciate values, but it definitely can help slow it down, in that we have more product available, right? So it's both those things. Well, those are both kind of side tangents. The thing I really want to dive into is I try to pay attention to what these cities' codes updates are, and I spent more time in the last several months studying maps of what areas are actually worth investing into before the code updates come, and then working on cities that have updated their code, which is why we started putting together projects in Everett, and we're starting to do project planning in Edmonds. But there was some drafts for some changes for the city of Seattle, and a lot of people, including myself, ignored it for a while because the code right now they have is pretty favorable, right? You can operate off their current code and it works fine. So whatever they're doing to match the state code, I knew was going to make it better, but I hadn't taken time to really dive into it. Well, they actually published that stuff like 3 months ago, and they're going through public commentary, and I finally took the time to deep dive on it. And I have to say, it's a lot more aggressive than I thought it would be.
Aggressive good or aggressive bad?
Aggressive good for developers. Aggressive good for developers. Like, for me to know how aggressive it already is, and to know what the new state changes were, and to know that if they only implemented the most basic stuff the state said, it would be moderately but definitely better. And I already started projecting what that product would look like even before their draft came out in September. But I finally took the time to read the draft. I'm actually going to go back on later today, and there's a section for public commentary that's going to close in a couple of weeks. I'm going to go in and put some public commentary in there. But they're consolidating 4 different zonings. So what was the old low density zoning was called single family zoning, which was labeled as SF 5,000, which was the smallest one, minimum 5,000 square foot lot, SF 7,200, and then SF, I think it was like 9,600. I think is what that third one was. I can't quite remember. And they didn't want to call it SF anymore. And so they relabeled them without really changing the code. They just relabeled it because it didn't make a lot of sense to say, oh, you can put 2 ADUs on an SF 5000 when the whole purpose of SF stands for single family. And so they just realized that using SF in their code titles is just really confusing to people when you're allowing ADUs, right? And they were, just by getting rid of the SF in the labeling might make it a little easier to explain new people what they can do with their property. So fair change. So really when it went from SF 5,000 and et cetera to these new zonings, it was NR3, NR2, NR1. NR3 is the equivalent of SF 5,000. What you could do with the lot didn't really change, just labeled it differently. And that was done after they had already made some changes, such as the ADU code and so forth. Prior to that change, they had made a medium. They did their first infill zoning change in the early 2000s, right around like 2008 to 2010, right around the Great Recession, in fact. And those are the low-rise residential stuff, and that's where all those townhomes came from. So you see all those like townhomes that are in Seattle now. I mean, they're not popular anymore. They're not unpopular, but that was like the first version of watching the city look different. We had all these old houses, and all of a sudden we're starting to see all these townhomes go. Yeah, so you've seen that product. So that product got really popular from around 2008, 9. I remember seeing my friend Thatch build that for the first time. And the first time I saw the product was like 2010. And I remember him selling those units. I want to say that I have to go back and look, but I want to say they're selling for under 3. But back then, based off what housing costs and material and labor, he was making profits on that back then, which is nuts to think about that. Can you imagine finding a fee simple unit in Seattle for under 300 grand? But I very specifically remember they were tall and skinny and subdivided. Yeah, it's the very beginning of seeing unit subdivisions.
Yep.
So those LR zonings came in about 20 years ago, not quite 20 years ago, but between 15 to 20 years ago. And then just a couple of years ago, they introduced something in between the SF zonings and LR zonings. They called it residential small lot. Residential small lots allowed you to take, they weren't as quiet because they did all the LR zoning on more busy streets. These were kind of the streets on arterials or the block on the backs, that shared alley on the backside of these arterial roads is where you'd see a lot of these LR stuff. And then they would go like to the SF stuff or now NR stuff. So RSLs were kind of like, hey, let's introduce a different zoning where we're not going to allow you to go quite as dense as the LR, but like an in-between. You could do like cottages, like 5 cottages on 10,000 lots, or you could do these tandem homes. Tandem homes are what a lot of detached ADUs look like. It's just another house on the back. The big difference is that they're not, the max size is different and you can subdivide it instead of condo it, right? And those, they let them go on lots as small as, I want to say RSLs when they first came out were around 2,500, and I think they're down to 2,000 now. But they let you basically subdivide to as small as 2,000. And so they don't let you subdivide it until you already get the permit to build it. So you have to do the building permit first and then do it's called a unilot subdivision. But basically it's a way to subdivide your lot smaller, right? And so a lot of developers were excited about this RSL zoning, right? So I read through the drafts, and they're basically getting rid of NR1, NR2, NR3, and RSLs. All 3 of those are disappearing, and it's all going to be one zone. I don't know. I can't remember what they're going to call it. Or I think I read it, but it didn't really matter. The labels to me don't really matter. I think the labels to them matter when they start to when they would talk and identify them. But since it's all going to be one, it didn't matter to me. The whole city is going to basically look like an RSL zone now, with an even smaller lot requirements than RSLs to comply with HB 1110. So there wasn't as many. That bill of the Growth Management Act didn't require the city to have their code updated to match both. I think I maybe have shared it with you on our podcast before that I thought the ADU code was going to be more impactful at first because it has a stronger deadline for the cities to update, which I still agree with. So as a whole state, that statement's true, but all of them are still mandated to make a multifamily update eventually. And the city of Seattle took the approach of, we're not going to take the time to update our ADU code alone like everyone else with this hard deadline. We've already done enough that we should be able to just do them both at the same time. So let's tweak the ADU code, and let's take our old, basically by taking their old RSL zoning and tweaking their minimum lot size, all they need to do is take the RSL zoning and say, let's make the minimum lot size go a little smaller, let it be even smaller if it's near major transit, and then get rid of the neighborhood 1, 2, 3 and make the whole city that, and then boom, we basically just accomplished what the state wants us to for the whole city, and we're done. We don't have to revisit it. And that's what that draft is 3 months ago. And the commentary for it, basically the commentary lasted between September to right now, or till the end of this month, where the public can basically speak back to it. Now, I've watched comprehensive plans, like the normal upzoning stuff, not this big kind of mid-housing, just the normal type stuff that happens, like the rural unincorporated county get upzoned or annexed into cities. I've watched that stuff. And so I've seen how this process works, where they plan something big and they give the public a chance to comment. There's always going to be people for and against, but in general, what we're looking at is this. As long as not more than 50% of the people are against it, what you're reading is going to happen. And if there are any edits between here and there, it's only because it's the only time they edit between here and there from this draft, even if the public isn't overwhelmingly against it, is because someone may have shared something in the commentary that the planners didn't think about, and they go, oh, that's actually really smart. This is, it's in line with what we were already thinking, but that's even better. But if it's not something that's just going to kind of enhance what they're thinking and give them an angle that they didn't think about before, then even if there is a 35-40% against, well, there's still more than 50% for, it's going, right? So a lot of people sometimes see that public I'm not saying for sure that it's going to finalize the way we're looking at this draft, but what I am going to say is this: I don't expect it to get much worse than what we're reading. I expect that and I've watched neighborhoods get upzoned to these LRs and RSLs, and they're and in the public commentaries just for that neighborhood, right? I've watched the feedback and comments, and almost all the time people are for it. It's the people who are against it are the ones that live in the most expensive, prestigious neighborhoods. That's the only time you'll get a large bulk of the people in the area against it.
Yeah.
You know,
can you see the comments as they run?
Sometimes in the Seattle's section, they have this website for it. I think they call it like Seattle, One Seattle.
They probably don't make them all public because you probably would just get a bunch of like spam on
No,
there.
they do. Surprisingly, you do, and you get the chance. Like not for the Seattle site, but the right near West Seattle, there's a part of unincorporated King County that they kind of call like the Highline area, and they an unincorporated. So for people to understand this, county planning is only meant for unincorporated county. So King County planning and code updates are basically like here's Seattle city limits, and then north of that will be like shoreline, right?
Yeah.
And then there'll be like tiny gaps where the shoreline doesn't exactly align to where Seattle isn't. There'll be gaps that don't fall within either city's jurisdiction, and that's what they call unincorporated county. And they will still label those addresses with a city, even though you're not in that city limits. And so when you're in this highline part of unincorporated county, it'll be a blend of addresses that usually say Seattle, but sometimes they'll say Burien, right?
Yeah.
But it's between Burien and Seattle on the west side near the water. And that's kind of like where White Center is, and some, South Roxbury and stuff like that. I actually was in contract for 4 parcels that were in that upzone area, knowing that the density was going to double, right? Couldn't get this, we ended up closing on it, but I've watched that stuff happen. And so obviously, and I was watching a public commentary on it, and you can see people's responses sometimes. Sometimes they make it public. It actually is just as common to see the commentary public as it is not. And so I would almost, a lot of planning divisions don't even do public commentary. Sometimes they just tell people like, here's when we're doing our meeting. You're free to come into the meeting, either virtual or in person, and give comments there. They don't always make it online polls. What I've noticed is that online polling for public commentary is more common for unincorporated county and Seattle. Some of the smaller cities, I don't see them doing that. I think you have to. It makes sense. Like, you have the small planning division barely able to keep up with handling permit intake, and now they're in charge with trying to put together a planning committee to make code changes when they're being pushed to do it, and the time delay of the resources to be able to really properly update their code and have time to have reviews and edit along the way requires manpower, and that requires bigger jurisdictions.
Yeah.
So
plus, if you're not required to do it, why do it?
Yeah, I mean, here's a really good example. 2 of the cities that updated their ADU code, it literally looks like because I think I mentioned this. The ADU code was written, the ADU law was written like code. It had all these code-driven things, like they have to allow 1,000 gross foot area. This is how your gross foot area is going to be measured. It has all these like restrictions in it, kind of like code development looks like. The 2 of the cities that had their code almost updated right away were not big cities; they were really small cities. The city of Steilacoom had theirs updated within, I think, the same calendar year that the bill passed. Same with the city of Snoqualmie. Well, how did they do that? Well, all they did was copy and paste the state bill and put it in their code. So they didn't spend any energy seeing if they should edit it, see what the commentary looks like, or whatever, right? And so, but I digress. This is, I think, for the world of Seattle developers, right? A lot of them are kind of like, let's wait and see, and let's wait and see on the other cities. The draft is up. It's been up for 3 months. The commentary ends in 2 weeks. And and there's some really good stuff there.
So do you think they're waiting to create projects until they see like how much density they can create, or what?
You would think I do that. I've already was starting to implement how I was going to apply that to the properties I have.
Yeah, like if you could fit one or two more on there, I mean, that could be a big deal.
Mm-hmm. So like, I always bought multifamilies that I could break up the way they were, right? But like one of the here's the example. I bought a property in Alki that basically had 3 houses on it. From all intents and purposes, if we're going to use today's terminology, it looks like a house with 2 dadus on it. The main reason why it doesn't look like a house in ADU dadu project is because all the houses are old and they were all built before the terms ADU were even a thing. Even mother-in-law or a granny flat, those terminologies didn't exist back then. We're talking like over 100 years ago. Like to them, it was just a house, and you could get a permit to add another house on the property. And the city didn't have density limits and all these weird rules. They just, you kind of, if you ever look at old permits, it literally looks like it looks like those 5x7 posts, the bigger notepads, like the smaller notepads, the 5x7 notepads. Yeah. It literally just looks like 3 lines of cursive writing with a signature and a date. And then, in later years, you would see stamps go on it. But even the oldest ones just were writing. And they always wrote in cursive too back then too, which was, makes it really hard to read.
Yes.
But I'd have this property, I have 3 little houses on it because, what I think the person was doing is they lived in one and then rented the other. Other 2 was like vacation rentals, because Alki used to be like kind of like the Hamptons of Seattle.
Yep.
And I bought it, I condoed it, and I refinanced it. And reading the code, I'd probably have to do some different things utility wise, like they're all, like make sure that it's a main sewer line versus like a standard one main sewer line with accessory connections, maybe direct water connections to get meters to them. But it looks like I could probably just turn it to a true subdivision. And not only can I just take those and make it a true subdivision, the minute that happens, then technically each one of those parcels, my max size, my per unit can go up, which means I can either do additions to those units, and there's a potential that I can actually add ADUs to those units, which means I could add density to those ones also. And I'm talking like, most people are like, oh, look, I got this little house with a big side yard and backyard. I'm talking like, I bought a standard sized lot that already had 3 houses on it. And it was already a hack that I bought that and condo it and make it worth more right out of the gate. But now I can expand the unit substantially and potentially add more units to it after these code updates. And this is something that looks like it was pretty close to being maxed out.
Yeah.
So
that's cool.
Yep.
Interesting. Very interesting.
You would think that people in my space would do the things I'm telling you, but I'm telling you the conversations I have, they're looking to people like me to teach them that stuff.
Well, for a lot of people, they just want to keep doing what they know, they just want to keep going.
Yep. Right. I think it fits my contrarian personality and always want to try new things. And people have comfort in copy and paste. I appreciate the stability of copy and paste, but I love the fact that the potential for higher margins comes from the fact that you are willing to be a contrarian and go against the grain. But it's not really going against the grain of what people want. It's like designing architecture. That's like trying an architectural design that someone hasn't seen before. That's like building a community, kind of like when someone did what's that vacation community that was on Highway 2, Leavenworth, like trying to visualize something that doesn't exist and then watch it come to fruition. There's always you can look at economic data to see that the local economy and gross and to see whether or not there's a need for it, but there's still always kind of a hunch of when that's going to play out. The way I like to do developments, we are definitely creating product that we've already have data to support people want. What I'm talking about is that when you read the code and you look at the landscape and you look at what people are doing, can you visualize something other people aren't doing that the data already shows people want it, right? And it's staring you right in the face, but you didn't think about taking this angle and how to achieve it. We're looking for properties a different way to get those margins.
Yeah.
And so cool. I don't think it's good to try too many conceptualized developments, because you can make a lot of money, but you can also lose everything. But there's for the people who want to be creative and study the comps of what the right product is, the right way to be successful, very profitable developer, there's gonna be some great Seattle opportunities with that draft. And I actually read an article that said that the mayor actually, according to Puget Sound Business Journal, he struck down a lot of the upzoning, but the upzoning he was striking down was the even higher density. It's like the more aggressive commercial grade is like, they call them like neighborhood centers, neighborhood commercial, where instead of just doing townhomes on this busy street, we'll let you go up 55 to 80 feet tall and do like some kind of mixed use, like an apartment over like retail. It sounds like he struck down some of those areas to have some of that put in. That really affects more larger commercial grade developers than it does the infill city people, like the people I'm mostly working with. So in summary, if you're a Seattle developer, you should be excited about what's coming. And if you have projects that you don't have, that you haven't, you know, I just talked to a client last night who he has to kind of not go completely to square one, but he was designing something and then he's kind of rechanging it. I can't stress it enough. If you're being forced to revisit any projects that you're already working on, because I know it's easier just to wrap it up and not, you know, even though if there's changes, don't go back on stuff you've started on. You've already worked on it, so why go backwards? But if they're already going to have to make edits to anything that you're starting to work on, and your financing allows for you to delay it, I would highly recommend that you look at those drafts, see how they apply to your property, and if they look like they're going to make massive changes to what you should do, it's probably worth waiting for. And that's hard to say because time is money, right? But the changes were aggressive enough that I do feel like it's worth a revisit.
Yeah, there could be some value in there for sure. What's okay? Let's wrap it up. Let's do one favorite thing. One thing that you're, I don't know, excited about. One thing that is a tool that you love. One thing, just it's pretty open. One of your favorite things. What do you got? You got anything?
Well, why don't you go first? Because I want to hear, because it was your idea. I want to hear an example of it, so I have a better idea to conceptualize what you're thinking.
Yeah, and I'll give you, and I'll tell you how you could use it too. One of my favorite things lately, I've really, and I've just begun the dive into this, but is like AI, and in particular, how to use like custom GPTs to create these sort of like little mini centers of the universe for myself, and looking at ways that I can automate more of what we're doing with the business using these new tools. This is pretty fun, and it's not as complicated as it sounds if you sort of piecemeal out what you want to do, and then you can find ways to do it. One of the cool things that you could do one of the things that I've been creating is a custom GPT that is like basically an estate planning expert. So you can create these custom GPTs, right? You have to pay, it's $20 a month to get like the pro version of Chat GPT, and you can create these custom things.
How much? $20 a month?
It's very low barrier to entry. But I created this thing, and it says basically like, you are an estate planning expert. You're going to rely only on the information that I give you to make decisions, or to provide information, or to answer questions. And if you don't know, then you're going to say that you don't know, but you're locked into basically what I give you. So I created this thing, and then I uploaded like all the RSTWs related to wills and trusts. I uploaded like all of the CLE stuff that I had, continuing legal education information that I had related to estate planning. Any white paper that I thought was interesting or helpful related to estate taxes, to you name it, related to estate planning. I uploaded all of that in there. So now it's got, and it included some examples and things like that. So I now have like this custom information center where I can ask it pretty specific questions and get really detailed quality answers, because the information that's relying on is only what I've given it. Right. So like, and you could
in
upload.
What format is it receiving the data? Is it only text, or can you upload documents and it reads the documents?
No. So PDFs, videos,
Excel documents,
anything that you want, you can upload, you can put in there, and it will just use it as, you're like creating your own database kind of. But you could, one of the things that you could do, for example, is instead of trying to find the differences, you could upload the Kirkland code and the Renton code, and you could say, hey, tell me what's different about these two codes. Analyze them as if you're an investment pro,
Mhm.
and it can tell you. So there's a bunch of different types of things that I think are potentially available there, whether it's just business ideas and having someone that like something that you can go to for help with business analysis. You could put your P&L in there, for example, create a separate custom thing and ask it to analyze your P&L and give you ideas and do all kinds of different things. And then there's also this other side, which is there are these agents that you can create basically that, for example, can read your email, draft potential responses in your voice, and then you can go in and just quickly edit or update or send, however you want. And you can customize it depending on, they will be able to know what the question is and be able to answer it based on some of your previous answers and also just based on the information that you're giving it. So it's interesting. I think there's a lot of, it's something that is new that I'm not good at, but that I think is a skill that is really important to begin to play with.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds pretty good. So it's something that you like, but that was definitely very business related too. So
super business. Yeah, it's super business related, but it's I think there are other applications potentially, but yeah, it doesn't have to be a favorite personal thing necessarily. It's just something that
I hear that, and maybe I'm just turning into a grumpy old man. You know what I think of when I hear that? I think of all the things I wish did exist that don't exist that seem so basic to me.
Tell me one.
Okay. What's the standard for smartphones?
Apple
iPhones.
Yeah.
Okay. How do we input information into how do we manually do data entry of what we're trying to find or look for or search or whatever? We either touch the screen or we talk to it by talking to Siri, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, they took away tactile keyboards when BlackBerries went away. Fine. Am I the only one who feels like that touch keyboard is fucking horseshit still, and that the autocorrect is and grammar corrections? Like sometimes it'll correct a perfectly fine word into some obscure name.
Yes.
I'm like, you've never seen me spell that name once in my life, and you're taking a perfectly fine spelled word and changing it. Like, what the hell are you thinking? And I'm like, okay, well, if ChatGPT is so big and popular, then maybe voice to speech to text should be a little better. Maybe I just talk too fast, but she don't understand shit. I'm just like, I'm gonna go do all that ChatGPT stuff you just told me, and I still struggle to get text messages to people that don't have grammar and spelling errors in them all the time because I have fat thumbs and I got to type into this touch screen that I feel like that technology could be better. And if that technology can't get that much better without adding a tactile keyboard, then it should be a speech to text improvement. And I can't figure out why, if AI is that smart, that speech to text is so bad.
Well, I think depending on the program that you're using, you can have different levels of
Apple messaging.
It's terrible. I don't use it.
It's fucking horrible.
Yeah. But I just think it's just not something that they care about. It's not at the top of their list to improve.
I think they need to move it up. That's the fastest way for me to go to Android right now. Tell me that Android is a million times better in just that category.
No, it's not. It's not either.
Yeah. Well, then, yeah, that's what I assumed, right? But it's weird to me because everyone texts each other and everyone types comments on each other's Instagram posts and their TikToks, whatever, right?
Yep.
Like there's more likes and comments than there are posts going up, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And the like is clicking just the like thing, so that's a little easier. I don't think people have to worry that much about missing that part. But if you go to like some post that's had like 100,000 views, then it might have like 10,000 comments, right? And in those 10,000 comments, the input tool for it is complete horseshit. And it just boggles my mind that no one has ever made that better. Anyways. Okay, let me stop being a grumpy old man.
So that's one of your not favorite things.
God, fuck, man. Someone spend some money and make that shit right. It is so freaking obvious. I mean, do you feel that at all? Do you
No,
have any?
here's why I don't feel it. I gave up on talk to text a long time ago. I literally tried it like 4 times, and I spent more time going back through to fix everything than if I
This
just
is how
typed it.
people are getting in fucking car accidents driving because they know they can't rely on speech to text, and so they're trying to type, and they shouldn't be trying to do either one, but they are attempting to do it. But a proper speech
Yeah.
to text would probably fix a portion of that problem. Let's save some
Probably.
lives,
It
right?
would. Mhm,
You
mhm.
know, if people are dumb enough to text and comment on social media posts while they're driving, at least give them a stronger speech to text method.
Yeah.
The technology's got to be there. I mean, I'm watching what
You would
AI is
think.
doing. You just told was it you that told me that the technology is getting good enough that it's going to like translate people's like different languages in our
It will.
you know?
I sent that link to you guys.
Okay, so how can it translate other languages to me, but it can't even translate the same language to me to speech to text? How is it
Because it's not
possible
the
it's going
same
to tell me
program.
what
It's
someone
not
in a
the
different
same
language is
program.
saying with me?
I don't
Should
know.
it be a dumbed down version of the other program fixes the other program?
You
We're not
would
even
think.
trying to do different languages here. We're sticking with one language, right?
Yes, I understand. Yeah, I agree.
And these fucking dumb shits. Fix your shit.
Grumpy old man. Grumpy old man.
Okay,
What's one thing that you're a favorite? What's
I'm
one
gonna
thing
give
that
something that's more time specific. I like to sometimes give people tips on where the market's at, like the most honest. Here's what you should be doing. Remember, I said this is the real time to buy now, refi later time, right? We already hit the
Yeah.
bottom of the market. I always try to look for things being overvalued, undervalued. The market right now, there's a moment when rates first went up where I felt like multifamily was supposed to get corrected because it affected cash flows. It was weird how resilient it was afterwards. And I think the reason why it was so resilient was because people had a lot of cash and Bitcoin cash ins and they wanted to buy something that hedged against inflation. So they bought multifamily. And I think that that's finally gone. The multifamily I'm seeing in premier locations are sitting and discounted and sitting and discounted. And that is the most undervalued space that I see in the Pacific Northwest. That I just see multiple listings where I think that looks cheap and it's not moving, or affordable. I think it's priced right and it's not moving, right? And if you can get an extra 5-10% off that, even greater. I'm not going to buy on that basis that it's already cheaper. You get an extra 5-10%. I would only buy if it was those two things plus has a value add to it. I just don't think that it's necessary to not buy that doesn't have all of it. But even with all three of those pieces, it's harder for me to find a house that you could build around development, but it's easier to find multifamily. And so, in this 3 to 10, I find a lot of it's falling in this like premier neighborhood, 3 to 10 unit space in Seattle. I see stuff sitting around. I'm just like, that would have sold so fast at that price, if not more, in the years that have passed.
Mhm.
And they're not moving right now. And I think that any kind of correction in rates in the spring market coming will fix that. So for people who might want to buy real estate in the next 2 or 3 months, that's the space that on a broader scale is available. It's exciting
So
how much good
cheap
stuff there is out there.
multifamily in Seattle. That's one of
Premier
your favorite
neighborhoods.
things. Premier neighborhoods. All right.
And that window's going to
Perfect.
close. It's going to close maybe as soon as 1 month from now, maybe as long as 3 months from now. But right now is a good time to buy in that space.
Got it. Love it. All right, cool. Well, that's it for today. We'll wrap it up there. I am Chris.
I'm Keen.
This is the Business Barbershop Podcast. See ya.
See you guys later.